Well, I'm going to be interviewed by the BBC, which concerns the subject of insults and abusive remarks being made about the Cornish people. And I understand that the BBC, later on the same day, are actually going to introduce an academic from a university to even question the existence of the Cornish. Well, there are kind of two things I'd like to mention here. Firstly, the existence of the Cornish. Well, I've had a careful look at the European guidelines, and the Cornish seem to satisfy all the requirements of a national minority. Certainly, I feel historically we do. We were connected obviously with Wales, and at one stage in Cornwall's history we were known as the West Welsh. We have our own identity of that, there is no doubt, and communally a desire to progress within our culture. We enjoy our own music, our own sports, we celebrate our own festivals, and there certainly is a Cornish community. Of course, overarching all that is the fact that we have an emergent language, a language which I doubt ever really died out. And there are more and more speakers of that language, and more people actually attending evening classes to learn it. Now let's look at some of the insults. Well, the insults have been many and various. They've come from quite well regarded journalists, and they've also come as off-the-cuff comments from members of the public. I just recall one which was written in The Guardian by a fairly well regarded journalist who commenced her article, "I hate the Cornish." I think of another which classed the Cornish as inbred and pasty munchers, and another in another newspaper, again by an award-winning journalist, who suggested that it was high time for the Cornish to be put in their place. So we do seem to exist in the minds of many, even if not in the minds of all academics. I remember receiving a letter a few years ago from a young man who was a bus driver and a student of the Cornish language, who happened to convey his tutor on the bus. And whilst they were engaged in a bit of brief Cornish, a member of the public overheard it, a holidaymaker, and became quite abusive about this. I fail to understand why people feel so threatened by the Cornish, why people find the need to insult the Cornish in the way in which they do. We are, after all, celebrating ourselves. We're celebrating our own history, heritage and culture, just as many other peoples do within the British Isles. And I think of the Welsh, Scots and the other ethnic minorities who've come to these islands down the recent years. I think the Cornish have a right to exist. They have a right to exist without having insults and abuse thrown at them. And I, for one, take many of these insults to heart. I find them truly upsetting, truly insulting. And I ask this: if I was a member of any other national or ethnic minority, would the insults be allowed to stand? Would they be allowed to be made? Would they be allowed to occur without some subsequent action? That is why I am one of many who have appealed to the Equality and Human Rights Commission to at least have our case properly considered. After all, what threat are we?